In the New York City public service system, the government is run by two unique but equally vital groups: the elected and appointed officials who design initiatives, and the employees tasked with implementing them. These are their stories. Dun dun! Hey everyone, this is Liz, and welcome back to Civil Conversations. I had wanted to start this episode by extending a huge thank you to everyone who listened to the first one, Intro to Civil Conversations, and to everyone that forwarded information along within their networks. The feedback that I've received so far has just been so inspiring and motivating, and to say that I'm beyond grateful is really just an understatement. If you didn't get a chance to listen to the first episode, it's a short introduction to the podcast outlining how the idea for this all came about, what we're aiming to accomplish through the conversations with colleagues that we've worked with, that are currently working for the city, and some that have left. Overall, it's just my strong belief that there's tremendous untapped potential in the minds of certain city workers who know their work and how to improve it for the betterment of the people they serve and just for our city overall. So what I want to do on this podcast, and part of what I want to do in this podcast, is acknowledge and spotlight certain civil servants. I had shared in the last episode that I've encountered many civil service heroes over the year, and the first that I want to highlight is my dad, Felix. He is actually what I see, I guess, is like the epitome of a New Yorican. He was born and raised here in New York City, down in Roosevelt Hospital in the early 1950s, and spent most of his childhood in Hell's Kitchen and in Harlem, where he was raised by his grandparents. He loves his sports, his salsa music, playing drums and congas, and of course, with growing up in that sort of like classic car era, is a huge lover of cars, old and new. You'll hear about his path to working for the city when he started back in 1986 for the Department of General Services, which you'll hear us reference as DGS, which later will go on to become what you now know as DCAS, or the Department of Citywide Administrative Services. He will later go on to work at the Department of Transportation when he got transferred when DGS was sort of being restructured during that time. He's always been a responsible man, an active man, and a man of routines. He'd always prepare his things the night before, and I was just trying to think back to those years, my young years when he was working and I was at home, and it just brought a smile to my face, thinking about how he had this like little travel bag that he'd prepare every day, which had some of his important papers. And if you can believe it, I don't know if people still have to do this, but like he'd have this radio face that he'd have to detach. You'd have to click in like a little radio face. So he had that in like a little plastic case that he'd have sort of set right there that he'd snatch up and grab before he'd go off and sort of start his day. And he's super regimented. Like his alarm would go off, he'd brush his teeth, he'd throw on a t-shirt and his dungarees, as he calls them, throw on his sneakers. My dad loves a good pair of sneakers, and his fitted Yankee or Mets cap. And just to be clear, he doesn't show a preference for one. They both get equal love. And he'd be on his way. And so with faithfulness, he'd stop at a corner store, grab his OJ, grab his Daily News and the Vocero, which is a Puerto Rican newspaper for those of you that don't know. And he'd do this on most mornings until he retired in 2013. Throughout all these years, he always demonstrated such a punctuality and pride in his work, and pride for his family. He's always worked so hard and been so loyal, and has been a person that many people have looked up to for his amazing work ethic, his humility, and his awesome sense of humor. So it's really an exciting opportunity to be able to sit and talk with him as the first guest on Civil Conversations. So again, our goal is to do a few things: to spotlight civil servants and civil service as a career and a profession, and to increase the appreciation for the workforce. I also aim to increase awareness of how things work and how to lift things up that are practical, and that we know can improve the city and its systems and its services. And we get into all of that in this conversation. So, of course, I'm biased, but I feel like it's really special, and I hope that you'll find it enjoyable and enlightening in some way. And I'll be back at the end with some reflections, and would love to hear about what you thought about the combo as well. So with that, and without further ado, here's a conversation with my dad and former civil servant, Felix. yeah, first time doing this, whole new thing. So we'll see if this like actually becomes. See how this goes.
Let's
I
go.
don't know.
Let's do it.
Okay. So I told you that this is an attempt to. I'm trying to articulate what this exactly is, and it might take time to make that better. But so, Civil Conversations, in my mind, that's the name of our podcast, Civil Conversations, is to talk with civil servants, people who've worked for the city, who, in my mind, right, when you have something that happens, you see on the news, press conferences, Channel 5, Channel 7, talking about, police stabbings or subway stabbings or ACS issues, potholes on the road. They're talking to the commissioners, they're talking to the mayor, they're talking to deputy mayors, people on the street, right? Which all fine and good, like legitimate, but they don't talk to people who work in the city agencies, like ever. If you're a student in a college studying government, studying to be a public servant, elected official, social worker, whatever it is you fill in the blank someone wants to do, you might have a chance to talk to city council members, commissioners, deputy commissioners, people at that level. They don't talk to people who actually work in agencies. Not that those people don't work in agencies, if you know what I'm saying. Like people who do the day-to-day, lack of a better term, grunt work that maybe is not as sexy, maybe not as like illustrious, but is the day-to-day work, right? So arguably, they know what happens just as good, if not better than other people. You also have like some of these people who they talk to have not worked there as long, right? So over my years, I've met people who've been at their agencies for 10, 15, 20, 30, 35 years, 40 years. So they know the ins and outs. They know all the people. They know the kinks. They know all the problems. And I think the assumption is that those people maybe don't have ambition. They're just there to collect a paycheck,
City
they're
workers
complacent,
are lazy.
they're lazy, right? But there's a lot of people who actually are like quite passionate. They know their shit. They know what they're talking about. But like no one really ever gave them a chance to showcase that side of themselves. Or they try at some point to like speak up. They have ideas and then they get shut down because it's like, well, we can't do it. It doesn't work that way. We don't have the budget for it. That's not what they want. That's not the vision, right? I say fill in the blank. It could be a myriad of reasons. But it doesn't mean they're lazy, they're complacent, they're jaded. And don't get me wrong, you have people who make that stereotype true, like the civil servant, but also say, like, if we rewound, what made them be that way, right? Was it after so many years they realized, like, if I go above and beyond, there's no incentive, so, like, why should I? Or did they try to do something and they got like dinged for it or like slapped on the hand for it? Or were they brought in under the wrong circumstances because they knew somebody and they had no real like gusto to do anything because they were set? Like this, all those reasons, right? So I feel like there's more to even talk about with those types of people. It's like, why are they the way that they are? But that's like for another episode. So all that to say, I've been around civil service. I feel like my whole life that I've been like, living, talking, breathing, being that could articulate and know stuff because you worked for the city for so many years. And then, I don't know if I intentionally meant to work for the city, but I feel like because you were around that and it felt like it was a stable life, that was something to strive for. So I feel like I kind of thought that would be where I would go. And then it turned into a whole different thing. So I feel like personally, my journey has been impacted a lot by the life we had, right? The people we were around. And I love those memories, like the years you worked at DGS, just being around those people. It's like friends and like work family.
Work family,
right?
Correct.
And then I built that work
family.
That was
a fun time, actually.
Yeah, it was a fun time. So I don't want to get too ahead of myself. But all that to say, your experience working for the city impacted my experience working for the city. And I heard all these stories that you had, right? Just working. And then I experienced them myself. And I feel like there's just there's stories to be told. And so that's part of what we want to do here is like tell those stories and understand people like in their day-to-day and in their lives. Like, what does civil service mean? What has your experience been like? and try just to get people to see civil servants and that workforce very differently, because it's, I think there's perceptions and then there's realities. So we're going to try and like break that down a little bit, but we'll see how that goes. So I would love to know, because we talked about this in some ways, but I don't think we ever like sat down intentionally to talk about it. So why did you start working for the city? Like, when did you start working for the city, and how did you get into working for the city?
Well, I actually had a friend that worked for the city. I actually worked for the private sector originally. And he asked me one day, he said, Felix, would you like to work for the city? And I said, yeah, I'd love to. He says, well, there's an opening if you're willing to come in as a provisional. And for me, it actually kind of worked out, because I started with the city August 1st of 1986. And in September, they gave the test. I took the tests that were required. And within 6 months, I was actually made permanent.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's a success story.
Yeah, that was, again, the salary back then wasn't the very best, but it helped me a lot, because in the private sector, you know how that works. You get a salary, and that salary just basically stays there. You don't move up, you can't go anywhere. And then, like I said, I took the test, was made a couple of years later, took the supervisor's test. That worked out for me, was made a supervisor, and I was there almost 28 years.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
But so before coming to work for the city, you were doing what? Like, what was you were already working in that industry?
Yes, I actually worked in the auto parts business, believe it or not, since I graduated high school.
Nice.
I graduated high school. Unfortunately, I took a machine shop, which was good then, but the problem was then when you went out to look for a job, no experience, no job. So I had a friend of mine who the father owned an auto parts store. And he said, Felix, my dad is actually looking for somebody to work. I said, okay, what's the dilly with that? He says, well, he's actually only looking for a driver. I said, okay, that's somewhere to start. And there was a little old man who was, I can never forget, his name was Sal. And he told me one day, he says, Felix, do you want to be a driver for the rest of your life in this business? And I said, no, I'd like to learn, but, I don't have any, but he says, he was a little old man, he was Italian, still had that accent. She says, Felix, don't worry, I will teach you the job. Okay, and that's when I started. And like I said, I worked from high school till I was about 23 years old. And that's when I got the opportunity to start with the city.
Wow.
And again, I started at the bottom and worked my way up.
So you were 23 when you started working for the city?
Yeah.
Wow, get out of here.
Yeah.
I thought it was a little later.
It was right after I met your mom, basically.
Get out of here.
Yeah.
Wow.
I met your mom. I was still in the auto parts business. And
and then your first job with the city was doing auto parts also?
Originally, we were called stock handlers. And basically, when I started was a truck would come in. My duty was to unload the truck, make sure everything was there, it was right, stamp my initial on there, and that went to another sector to get done. And then, like I said, little by little, I'm not blowing my own horn, but I like to work.
Yeah.
I like to work. So apparently the higher-ups like that. And when I took the test for supervisor, I was basically made pretty quickly after that. And like I said, yeah, I started, like I said, I started August 1st, 1986, and I officially retired in April of 2014.
Nice.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Long time.
A long time.
Yeah.
I know.
Long process.
I know. But it's good that you actually, like, it worked out that way. And, you know, it's fascinating because you have, like, the civil service process where it gets a bad, it has a bad rap, and I think it deserves it. But at the end of the day, like, you got referred by someone who knew you did good work to get in. And I feel like that's, you know, not always a bad thing, but it can be hard for people to get through. So it's good that it worked out for you, because for many others, it's like a multi-year process if they even get their foot in the door, which is just really, really unfortunate.
You know, and the sad part is there were people that were there before me, and they you know, they wanted to go up in the world, so to speak, but they didn't want to take any tests. And unfortunately, with civil service, no tests, no promotions. Basically, you wherever you are, that's where you stay. And believe it or not, I had one of my workers work for 37 years, always in the same position.
Wow.
And I always used to tell him, he said, "So Phil, you know, Gunya, you've been here all these years. Take the test, man. You know, this way, you know, I understand that, you know, we're unionized and the union gets us raises and all that stuff. But, you know, you go from a stock worker to a supervisor of stock workers, and, you know, and that brings you a little extra. And then you take the test, because in the supervisory position, there are 3 levels. It's level 1, level 2, and level 3. So, you know, that's just what like I said, every time the test came out, I took it. And like I said, I started as a stock worker. Then I went to a level 1 supervisor. And a few years later, I took the test, was made level 2 supervisor, and then level 3 supervisor, where I basically ran the parts department, as so to speak. I mean, of course, I had bosses and I had people that I had to, you know, to account to. But if not, you know, I still would have been making $18,000 a year,
no,
basically.
Of course.
I mean,
I understand. I understand.
And it's actually, listen, it made it wasn't easy. Everybody thinks, oh, you work for the city, it's an easy job, you sit behind a desk, you don't do. That wasn't it's not me. I was a working supervisor, so to speak. I wasn't a supervisor that sat behind a desk and said, well, listen, you do this, you do that. Truck came in, I was out there with my boys, just like everybody else. And at times, the bosses used to get on me because of that. So, Felix, you know, you got people to do that work. I just, it's not me. I can't sit around and again, it wasn't easy being a supervisor at times, because, you know, sometimes, unfortunately, you got workers that, again, they fit the criteria.
Yeah, sure.
You know, they want to sit around, they don't want to do anything. Oh, you know, or if not, oh, that's not my job, it's not my duty. I mean, but you know what? You work around all of that.
And I do feel like there were still, like, a lot of good people that came along the way too. So it's unfortunate. You don't want it to
absolutely.
You don't want it to jade your.
In fact, I had workers that they moved on, which I really missed. I mean, they everything that needed to be done got done, that was my main contention. When somebody came to me as a new employee, or listen, I'm not here to bust chops. I'm not here to boss you around anything. All I need for you to do the job. Once the job is done, you want to sit in a corner over there and chill for a little bit, I got no problem with that. It's as long as the work gets done, I'm good with that. I got no, you know.
And I'm curious. So you worked for the city for most of your adult life. Is that what you had envisioned doing when you were a young guy coming?
No, well, actually, like I said, I took machine shop as a sort of quote unquote major in high school. Unfortunately, I didn't go on to college, but and I like that. I like to work with my hands. I like to make things. I like to, but again, unfortunately, and at that time already, that was something that was starting to wane. Like there was, it was more like a specialty type thing, and again, no experience, no job. Basically, I mean, I'm not gonna lie. I probably went on. Oh man, after graduation, I must have gone and done 20 interviews, and I'd bring work with me that I had done when I was in high school. You know that the finished product, and everybody liked what they saw, but again, they were looking for people who had more experience, and so you know what. In a way, it was good. It was good, and it was bad because again, I felt bad because I said, "Geez, I can't get a job. I can't." But then again, the opportunity arose where I worked in an auto parts store, and I like that. That's another thing for me was I'm into cars.
Yeah, you love cars.
I love cars. I'm not gonna lie. I had friends that had cars, and we work on them in the middle of the street. We change transmissions, we do engine work, and I like that. So when my friend approached me about the job as a driver, I said, well, I guess I gotta start somewhere. I have to work. I have to maintain myself. Yeah. And then from there, I kind of lucked out. One day I was actually making a delivery to the city because the auto parts store that I worked for, they had a contract with the city. So one day I made a delivery and I met Paul, which became one of my best buddies. Yeah. Unfortunately, he's not with us anymore. And he asked me one day, he said, Felix, by any chance, are you interested in working with me here? I said, well, listen. He said, you can put your foot in the door. He says, it's provisional. Yeah. But when it says not too many people want to do this kind of work. So, okay, it's provisional. And 90% you'll be able to hang in there because as a provisional, if you can easily lose the job too. Yeah. So and then like I said, tests came and took tests and actually did pretty well on them, which hallelujah, worked to my advantage. Nice. And that's how I was able to put my kids to let them an advantage for it was
that was one of my first jobs. I remember working at DGS for Paul too. Because I used to go to work with you and I put in the work orders in the computer and those green screen computers. Those good times. I remember it's like that little wooden box. It was like a parts room. Was it like the little gate on the window? Yeah. And then you had the guys come up, ask for parts, do like the little part slips, and then I would enter the part slips into the computer. Yeah. So that was my first class in computers.
Believe it or not, that was my first experience with computers. Because when we worked in the auto parts stores, everything was done paper. Yeah. There was no such thing as like now you go to AutoZone and they tell you, well, what do you need? And you give them the information of the vehicle, they put it up on the screen, and boom, 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 everything shows up. It wasn't like that. Back then, to look for parts, you had to get out a manual. You had to start looking for the year and what you needed, and but everything was on paper. There was no such thing as a computer, and it was a little difficult that way. Sure. But as time went on, computers ruled. Yeah. And it got a little easier. Yeah.
Wow, parts books. I forgot about those.
Yeah, no. So everything was a part. Everything was looked at. Yeah, you looked at the parts book, and sometimes by the end of the day, your eyes were cross-eyed from looking at this book all day long. But hey, it's
that's so crazy.
It's the way it used to be.
So, I'm curious, in terms of all your years working for the city, like what would you say were some of the highlights for you when you look back at your career?
Well, I mean, again, it was to me, my pleasure was that again, I like to work. I wasn't afraid to do anything. Bosses used to tell me, Felix, can you do this for me? Sure, why it was rewarding.
Yeah.
I mean, as it was, again, it wasn't easy at times, but for me personally, it was rewarding. You know, I made a nice, decent living where, you know, we thank God, my wife, my kid, you guys, we never wanted for anything. You know, and sometimes times were a little rough, you know, because things happen, and you know, but it was for me personally, the years that I put in, and of course now I can live in peace, have a nice pension, you know.
Which I'd say arguably you worked for, right? Because
Definitely.
there's trade-offs when you work for the city. And I say that because I feel like that, unfortunately, is one of the things that I get. It costs money, but it's a nice retention feature, right? To give people something that they maybe weren't compensated for in salary over the years, but can have that security into their retirement,
Yeah,
right?
well, that's another thing. I mean, I'm not going to lie. At times, I used to get a little frustrated because I kind of felt that, you know, they should have, what we call merit raises. You know, every once a year, you know, throw me a bone. I'm doing the right thing. Throw me a bone, which didn't happen very often. But you know what? Life goes on.
Yeah, no, I
That's,
understand.
I mean,
I
you know,
understand.
that's the way it is. Yeah.
And in terms of like feeling, this is always like my curiosity. Like, did you feel like over the years that you felt like you were valued? Like your supervisors obviously were very vocal about like your work ethic, but do you feel like that was always acknowledged, or like you were really valued? Like, I don't know, how did that feel over the years? And I know like Bob's and Wayne's with different people, because different people come in and take over.
Yeah,
But
I mean, yeah. Believe it or not, all the bosses that I had, we used to have meetings like every month or something like that, and they also always used to tell me, "Say, Felix, you know, we appreciate, man." He says, "You do a fantastic job." You know, unfortunately, that's all I can tell you, and I can't. I wish we could do more for you, but unfortunately, with the circumstances with the city, you know, it's a whole criteria to try to get you a lousy $500 or whatever it was to get you a merit raise. But you know something? Even them telling me that gave me, how might you say it? Inspiration.
yeah, like some validation
Yeah,
that at least you're
exactly.
doing a good job. Yeah.
I mean, you know, all of them. I mean, every director that I had always used to call me up to the office and sit down, Felix. You know, you do a good job. You know, we appreciate it. You go beyond and you know, above and beyond, and like I said, yeah. I mean, there were times like, let's say on snow days. Snow days we used to work 14, 15 hours a day, and again, we were out there loading, unloading, snowstorms. Yeah, and again, I was happy.
Yeah.
I mean, happy in the sense that at least I can put food on the table for you guys, and you know, we had things that we couldn't get before and stuff like that. And the only thing I was a little bit unhappy was that the gentleman that was there before me made probably double my salary and did basically a lot less. But you know, hey, listen, these are things that you have to contend with, you have to deal with.
Yeah.
The way it is.
No, I understand. And it's a little crazy because I feel like part of where, and I always remember, like, you're always willing to not only like work hard during your work day, but you always were working overtime, working evenings, working weekends when stuff like that came up. So it's, you know, sometimes I feel this perception is like, it's not that it's easy money, but like people, not that they shouldn't be grateful. I'm trying to like phrase it or think about it in a certain way. But people work for that money, right? And it provides that extra cushion in case of emergency. It's not like people are balling on these city salaries. Like, don't get me wrong, some people might abuse it, but there's that aspect to it too sometimes that I think gets lost in translation. Like, when we had COVID times come up, there were people who were like being asked to work overtime because they had staffing shortages, and people were just like, look, like I'm exhausted. I don't want to burn myself out. Like money is money, and that's all fine and good, but come on now, like it's just you're a person. So it's like where you might have had like positions open, so you're doing the work of like multiple people, or predecessors who are making more money leave, and you don't get any of that. It's just like an unfortunate side effect sometimes when you're a good hardworking person.
And unfortunately,
maybe anywhere, but I only know civil service.
Unfortunately, in my case, well, I mean, I had good workers, and they would leave, and of course, listen, everybody wants to move on and do better for themselves, and then unfortunately, I hate to say it, I was given people that I didn't choose to do the job, and like I said, it just didn't work. It wasn't.
Yeah.
It was a nephew of a commissioner. I mean, I hate to say it, but it's the truth. Truth is truth. The one time they gave me this gentleman to work for me. The gentleman didn't even speak English, just because he was the brother of somebody higher up in the city. But you know what? It's still
par for the course.
Yeah, exactly. The bottom line is the work had to get done.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's for me that. And at the end of the day, I left with a clear conscience. Felt good about myself that I did the right thing. Like I said, it's again everybody's contention is city workers. Not for anything. Let's use police for an example. They're out there doing a job. They're highly criticized. Let's go with sanitation. Everybody says, oh yeah, they're picking up garbage. Big deal. I got news for you. When it's 35 below zero and you're picking up garbage, that's something that most people don't want to do. And with us, again, I'm not blowing our own horn, but we were out there 24/7. 7 days a week, 365 days a year, whether it was 35 below zero or 135 degrees in heat. Well, again, work had to get done. But we had our poor guys out there filling potholes. People rolled down the windows. You freaking assholes! Why you're holding up traffic? Then the car runs over the pothole, the tire blows away, and then they're still gonna blame you for. So it's
damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Exactly, damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, part of that is what I hope to get out of different conversations with people, because I hope to talk to people in like sanitation, PD, fire, because there are a lot of those like things where you're on the front lines and people take out some of their aggression and frustration with you, and it's like it's not my policy, it's not like something that I said we wanted to do or wasn't my decision, but like you're the one who has to deal with people and their aggravation.
You just mentioned fire department. Oh man, these guys they're in a firehouse sleeping all day. Well, I got news for you. When that alarm goes off and those guys go out into the field to turn out a fire, you don't even know if you're gonna make it back.
Yeah.
But people don't think like that. People think of the negative side of the job. It's
it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, over the years working for the city, I mean, you kind of spoke to this already, but what were like the highlights? That definitely, it seems like, were the stability you feel like you brought, and you got recognition for your hard work, and I guess like having good not companionship, but like friendships that you've built maybe over the years with people, or like good like relationships you've had with colleagues. But like, were there any things that you found like frustrating or challenging over the years?
Frustrating for me was, okay, in my line of work, You got to remember, when I was with DOT, we had 2,500 vehicles. And every part for those vehicles had to be ordered and gotten through my office, my workplace. And the frustrating part was that if a car needed a part or something like that, me personally, I would have had some money set aside to buy stuff from an outside vendor, like let's say a commissioner's car. Commissioner's cars are important. You need a part for it. You call the vendor doesn't have it. Then of course the commissioner wants that car has to be done, ASAP, and then the vendor doesn't have it. It's going to take me this time to get the part. So then, of course, then the supervisor of that shop, but I can't wait. I mean, my hands are tied. You really can't do anything about that. So finally, I went to the higher ups. I says, listen, when there's an emergency that you need something in a rush, you guys have to do something. You have to make it that I can be able to get that part basically immediately. So they did implement. Finally, they got a little fund together, and there was $3,000 in there for stuff that was needed for that purpose. Something that was, which I sort of like pride myself on that, because everything is, no, we have to wait for the vendor. Well, a commissioner doesn't want to hear that.
Yeah, sure.
A higher up doesn't want to hear that. Well, why is my car taking so long? So, and then we also implemented that if we needed a part from another agency, that also worked for us. Like we can call PD, so listen, I need a part for Commissioner so-and-so's vehicle. Like, this is the part I need. I see, of course, we can look in the computer and see who has it.
Oh, nice.
So we could ask them, listen, can we have that part? Can you transfer it to us? And, things got, but, like I said, it's a little nerve-wracking, because, again, it's they're sort of like, they're pinning you against the wall. I need it.
Of course. I know. That's a fascinating point, because my thing is, and I get it, because I've dealt with that all the time. It's like, depending on who asks you for it, there's a certain level of urgency or a certain level of obligation to just do it, right? Regardless of whether it's right or it's wrong, to do it. But because someone's asking for it, it's like, just get it done. And then also, like, the timeliness of it. It's like, for certain people, the timeline needs to be, what do you call that? The timeline needs to be, I'm trying to think of it.
Almost immediate.
Like expedited, right? This is like an expedited task, all that stuff. I'm like, why can't we just have that urgency for everything? Like, I would love to just have that urgency for everything and everyone. Why is it that depending on who asks for it or who it's for, it depends, right? Or it sort of like dictates whether you can move fast on it or slow. Because it's fascinating. I've seen that so many times, where the process is the process, and it's a city process that takes forever. I'm not saying it's the right process to follow, but it's the legal process to follow. But then if someone wants something yesterday, you got to find a way to make it happen. So it's like, if we make those things happen, why can't we apply that to everything?
That is correct.
And it's not a bad thing to ask for.
Another frustrating is a shop would order a part, let's say, for instance. So we make out a shipping instruction that gets shipped to the vendor. The vendor will call you the next day and say, Felix, the part is on back order. So then, of course, a couple of days later, the shop is asking you, well, where is this part? Why is it taking so long? Well, unfortunately, it's back ordered from the vendor. I can't, there's not really much more I can do, unless, again, like I told you before, if we dip into the fund, if it's something that's if not, like I said, it's and that also frustrated me, because I get a call from the shop supervisor every day. Felix, the part for this certain vehicle, but so I'd look it up, I'd find out what the part is, call the vendor, sorry Felix, part is still on back order. Oh, well, good then, why's it taking so long? They're bothering me from upstairs. This vehicle has to get out. Sorry,
Yeah.
can't help you there.
Yeah.
And it's, little things like that were things that were frustrating. Again, part of the job,
Yeah.
but it was,
It's like those shouldn't be the reasons. Sometimes those are the silliest things that impede you from doing what you have to do and in the time frame you want to. Because sometimes I feel like, to your point before of like people's perceptions, it's like, are you assuming that I'm not doing what I need to be doing and that this is not on back order and I'm just like blowing smoke up your ass and like buying myself time or like not doing my job? But it's not that. It really is.
and again,
I have to follow these rules. I can
yeah.
only go to this one person. It's like chain of so many things that they need to get before it gets to me. But sometimes people's perceptions or assumptions are that you're not pushing stuff forward, even though you're trying to. It's just you're caught up in some of that
the thing that I
nonsense.
used to do is a supervisor will call me, Felix, we have a part on order for since that such and such a day. What's going on? I said, no problem. Called the vendor. Within a half an hour, they had an answer. Sometimes it wasn't the answer they wanted to hear,
Sure.
but that's unfortunately that the city way is. It has to come from the vendor. That's and I understand what the supervisor of the shop is coming from, because from up above him, they're probably
Of
getting the
course.
wrath too for why
Of
is this
course.
taking so long, stuff like that, and
Yeah.
you know, in other words, the frustration starts from me and it works its way up all the way to the top,
Yeah.
so to speak.
Sure.
But
No,
and then another thing is, we actually were talking about this. We have a certain amount of vendors for certain things, and they put money into these parts places like Mac or Chevy or whatever, Ford or whatever. If there's excess money in one of those how would you say it,
Like in a budget
in
of
one of those budgets, exactly. Why make such a big process of taking some of that extra money and put it where we need money for, let's say, I'm going to use it for instance. We spoke about this. Mac gets $15 million a year for that we can spend. Chevrolet gets $3 million. 6-7 months later, Chevrolet money is done, and then the Mac money. There's still half the money there. What's the big deal about taking some of that Mac money? Jesus, put it into Chevy and make everybody life easier. But no, it's a process. You can't do it that way. And then again, we get back to the same old adage. All the Chevy cars get put off to the side because there's no money to buy stuff for it, and then that's where the supervisor feels like I need this, I need that.
Yeah, your hands are tied.
Sorry, Charlie, can't help
Crazy.
you.
It's crazy. So, in terms of things that I don't know, if you had, because I feel like we talked about this, like civil servants get a bad rap. So, is there anything that you feel, maybe things, I don't know, either from civil servants or from the city itself, do you think might improve how people see civil service or like see its workers or like value people more? I don't know. I feel like my experience, I definitely felt like my years working for the city, I really appreciated them, both for like the work that I was doing, the people I was working for, the stability, right, for my income. Like, knock on wood, during COVID, I did not lose my job, and I was super grateful for that. And I had my insurance and all those things, right? Flexible reporting, like all of that, super grateful for. But I feel like there are times where, again, you fall into that, well, in some instances they want above and beyond, and sometimes they want people who just like fall in line and do what they do because that's your place, right? So it's like what do you call that? Like a catch-22 or like mixed messaging on like what's expected from me. Like, do you want me to do my best, or do you just want me to like do what you want me to do or like need me to do? And that's, I feel like it comes to like when it comes to the regulations, when it comes to the policies, when it comes to the obeying the law, and or not the law, but like the lay of the land more than anything. Like, don't rock the boat. This is just the way it is. That's the way it's supposed to be. But then, I feel like the people who are doing the work
And I hated
sometimes
that,
get
He used to tell me, something, don't rock the boat, don't, But wait a second, you want me to, do you want me to do the job, or do you just want me to sit back, relax? What's, what's the...
Yeah. So it's definitely like some of that like catch-22 mixed messaging that people, who work at the sort of like tail end of things get stuck with. So it's like the bad rap on some of those systematic things fall on us because our hands are tied or we're limited in what we can do. So I'm just curious, like, is there anything you think, I don't know, is there anything you wish were different, or like something like in an ideal world? I mean, it seems like your experience was generally positive and good, but like would there be something, or is there something that you wish could be different or would be different?
Like I said, it's unfortunately when you work for government, I guess the policies sort of like tie your hands. And yeah, like I said, but I again, like I was telling you before, there was some frustration about certain things that I thought could have been done better, but again, our hands are tied because of the policy, and like we said before, we tried to do something above and beyond, and it was like you wanted to go over the higher ups head, so to speak, and they knock you for it. Like I said before, don't rock the boat, leave things the way they are, don't, and it's not easy. Not easy.
Yeah.
Like I said, it's working, and I understand that the government has its policies, and things have to be done a certain way. That's the law. It's but it's not that's not like in the private sector. In the private sector, you need something, you get the money, you get it, buy it, and it's done, finished. And but unfortunately, with the city, it's not. You can't do that. It's not feasible.
Yeah, it's more complicated.
Yeah.
So you've been in the city. You grew up here, obviously born and raised in New York City, but working for the city, you've been around for a long time. So mayors, you've been around for
lots of them. Lots. Yeah, I've been around. I was around for Beam, Dinkins, Koch for a good while. Koch, then after Koch, if I remember correctly, was probably Giuliani. And when I got out, I think Giuliani was still there, possibly.
Bloomberg after Giuliani.
Oh, Bloomberg. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, Bloomberg was.
And you were gone by de Blasio, or you were?
No, I was. Bloomberg was the last mayor
Gotcha.
I worked for.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and believe it or not, everybody sort of like didn't like Dinkins, but I liked Dinkins because he was more a people person. He actually, I was invited a few times to go to Gracie Mansion, and he spoke to you like a real person, like you were one of them. Some of the other ones, they were a little bit arrogant, but working for Dinkins, I think again, most people would probably not think so, but I think working for Dinkins was probably the best.
Yeah.
And working for Koch too. Koch was like he was weird. Koch was Koch. I forget, he had a saying, "Am I doing the right thing?" or something like that. He used to say, and he was the roughest one to work for. I think was Bloomberg.
Yeah.
Because Bloomberg was more of a business type person, and he was, the budgets were he tightened up on everything. It was like a little bit more. But again, listen, I made a living.
Yeah.
I did what, listen,
Yeah.
for me, it worked out.
Yeah.
I'm not going to lie.
Yeah.
I put in, basically, like I said, almost 28 years. And
Yeah. I gotcha. So if you could have like any advice or suggestions for people who are looking to get in the sector or working in the sector, do you have like anything that you would say to advise them, encourage them,
again,
tell them to stay clear?
yeah, no, but again, for me personally, you do the best you can.
Yeah.
I mean, again, there's going to be people who are going to be standing in your way when you want to do something that you feel is right and stuff like that. Most people are going to say, "Well, no, you can't do that. It's not the way it's done around here." And unfortunately, Baba, you have to. That's something that you have to realize that it's the way it is.
Yeah. I gotcha.
Yeah. But yeah, no, like I said, working for government it's got its moments, but it's okay. It doesn't. And again, like we said before, oh yeah, you work for you work for the city, yeah. Pfft. I bet you only work 2 hours a day, or you put in you do your work and you sit down for the rest of the day. And unfortunately, for some people, yes, but for most of us, no, it doesn't work that way.
That's not true.
It doesn't work that way. I'm sure you know about that also.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
I'm sure you would have wanted to implement certain things too.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, sorry, Liz, you can't do that. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like over the years, I definitely was more, and I'd be fascinated to talk to the people I worked for when I first started working for the cities. They probably thought I was obnoxious as shit because I was always questioning things, and I was like fresh out of college. And when you're in college and you're a young person, you're like fight the establishment, right? You're young, probably in Vietnam. You was fighting like no war, right? Like all these things. People, when you're young, I feel like you have that fire to like push back on the establishment and like question rules and all that. So fresh out of college, I was a very different worker than I am now. And that's crazy to say. Yeah. I mean, I was young and I also didn't have kids. So I feel like the level of risk I was willing to take before having my kids was very different because, fuck it. If I lose this job, I go on to the next one. I didn't feel that level of anxiety to be somewhere, right? Because when I started working for the city, again, it wasn't like because you worked in the city, I had to get a job. And to be clear, like you didn't set me up with anybody to get a job. It just happened to be like how things worked out because I got interested in it. I went to school for it. I did internships and all that stuff. So I happened to get into working for the city. But, I just felt like when I was younger, I could get away with asking more, questioning more. And then I had Enzo a few years into working for DYCD. And my boss at the time was like, I've seen this incredible change in you, Liz. Probably because I was just like more docile. I need to keep my job, which didn't mean I got complacent, but it definitely changed how much I pushed on things and how many questions I asked because, right, like my attitude toward work and my workplace was very different because now I need my insurance to cover my whole family, not just myself. And like, I'm an adult and I need insurance. Those things, like, they change your life.
And then another thing is, I know, like you just said, and I'm sure you were the same way. You want to come in, you're all gung ho.
Yeah.
Oh man, I finally
you're bright-eyed and bushy-tailed.
Yeah, I want to go. I want to do this. I want to do that. But then when you, unfortunately, you want to do this and you want to do that, but then you get blocked there.
Yeah.
And that's another thing that's frustrating too. You want to do things. I got this idea. I want to run it by you. Oh no, I'm sorry. You can't do that. It doesn't. Yeah. And that also
that eats away at you over time for sure. Yeah. And I think that's where over the years, like you start to learn because it feels like a relationship. Like, you know, you're with a significant other, and it's like I put myself out there, or like you're dating or you're with someone, and then you feel that rejection. It's like only so much rejection you can take before you're like, you know what, I'm not putting myself out there anymore, because it starts to like eat at your self-esteem. It starts to eat away at like your motivation. And so it's a very real thing.
And again, you know, it's this is sad to say, but sometimes, like I said, you want to do things and they block you, and then it comes to the point after a few years, you know, you say, ah, fuck this,
Yeah.
I'm not doing this anymore.
Yeah.
I'll do what I have to do, and
Yeah.
you
And
know.
also too, it's like not to take it to that point, but like to focus on the negative, because it's certainly not that. But you do that, or you make a suggestion, and then you're not the person who gets credit for it, right? So you, to your point earlier of like, oh, I
Wait,
can't
wait a
get the
minute, I think I brought
$500.
that
Yeah,
idea.
I don't get that $500 merit raise that I was asking for, which is like not much at all. But then this person gets promoted to this title for making such like improvements to the department that might not have been their ideas, right? So that also starts to impact how much you raise your hand, because it's not to say you should be the one to get credit. It's not only about that, but you know, those things make differences in your growth opportunities and the income you have for your families. So it's, you know,
And
not
another
a flattering
frustrating is
thing to
I
happen.
know this is hard. This is I'm not bad mouthing anybody, but another frustrating thing was too that, you know, here you are, you're doing the right thing, and somebody comes from nowhere and they get a higher position than you, and say, wait a second, what the hell is this? And I've been doing this job for all this time, and where does this person already, you know, appear from?
Mm-hmm.
And but again,
Yeah.
you know, I put in my years. I'm happy. I'm retired now.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoy my grandkids. Married 47 years. You know,
Yeah.
it's all good, Beryl.
Yeah.
You know, now it's time for the younger generation to go through
Yeah.
the trials and tribulations
Yeah.
of city life, so
Yeah.
to speak.
Yeah. Gotcha. And all the people that you worked with, I mean, that's one thing that I feel like sticks out to me. You know, part of where, so for myself, you know, I started working for the city back in 2008, 2009, around that time. And there's people still to this day, you know, so many years later, that I still keep in touch with, that I consider like very close friends. In some instances, you know, like close to family,
Yeah.
because we've worked together, we went through a lot together, and we've kept in touch, and we spent time together offline. And there's so many people through that network. You know, it's sort of like the city is like a larger family in many regards. Like we have friends who work for the city, you know, spouses and significant others of friends that, you know, who work for the city. So in many ways in New York, it's quite fascinating how you have this, without knowing it, a network, an attachment to like people who work in other city agencies, and you have that camaraderie, you know, and that in common, because regardless of whether you work in one agency or another, you have a lot of stuff that just is so alike, right? These common things that come up, even though you work in FDNY in Brooklyn, this one works in auto parts shop in Queens, and then I'm do parks work, or, you know, work for housing in the Bronx or wherever. Yeah, like it's, regardless of where you are, department, it's just like you meet these people who all work for the city, and then you have these like common stories despite working in like different agencies and different boroughs doing different work. There's like naturally some things that just come out that are in common.
Another thing that was funny is most of the people that worked in my position, they didn't get along with vendors.
Mm.
You know, I think that they felt that, you know, they got the contract. You know, the vendor needs to. And with me was, I call a vendor, said, listen, I have this such and such part on order. Can you give me an ETA? And they give me an ETA, and I pass it on to the next. And they said, Felix, you know, you're so different from all the others. All the others were like, they was like, I don't know how to say it exactly, but they were
like more demanding because they had a city contract.
They were like, and he says, you know, I talked to you, and we have carry on. In fact, some of the vendors, they said, "Wow, man, it's a pleasure to," and listen, it's like anything else. You want to be treated. My dad always used to tell me, treat people like you want to be treated. It's okay. I understand. It's a business. You're speaking to a vendor, but you can't speak to him like he's a dog.
Yeah, of course.
You call up. You said, "Listen, can you do me a favor? Part number such and such and such and such. I ordered it on such a day. On shipping instruction, I always used to give them everything so they could, because I assume they put everything into their computer. Shipping instructions such and such. Can you give me an ETA? Oh yeah." 2 days, 3 days, whatever it was. Bro, I appreciate it. Thank you so much, and have a great day. And
yeah,
but again, for me personally, I liked it. That was I enjoyed what I did.
Yeah.
I really did. Most people say, "Oh man, I'm stuck here." I don't know.
Yeah. Well, it seemed to be a place where you could be connected to stuff that you liked, like working with cars, being around other guys who worked on cars. You guys do that stuff after work too, and on weekends.
Yeah.
So again, you had like people
Look at Mikey,
you.
for instance, my friend Mikey. I mean, we started the same day.
Nice.
We landed up in the same places.
Yeah.
All those years later, unfortunately, he unfortunately he's a little younger than I, so he's still on the job. But yeah, we still keep in touch, and yeah,
that's a beautiful side to it. Meet good people.
He's like I said, you meet a lot of interesting people. You meet some characters, lots of characters.
Oh yeah.
Working for the city. So I mean,
No,
yeah.
for sure.
Yeah, like I said, I can't complain. I really. I mean, yes, I can't complain about things that happened during the years I was there, but something, that's all now behind me, so to speak.
Yeah.
And I kind of laugh because here I did the job basically by myself, and when I left, 3 people had to do my job. So, but
good job.
Is what it is. C'est la vie, mon chéri.
I know, that's right. Such is life. But I'm happy for you, and very proud of the people I come from. I say, me being exposed to that at a young age just taught me like a certain appreciation for like humble people that do hard work. I've always come from that, right? Like I feel like we've always been humble people who admire hard work because we just aren't in it, right? So I feel that pride.
Well, that was instilled in me
like
since I was a kid. I mean, listen, at 13 years old, I work in a bodega, stocking shelves and making deliveries, and I mean, that's the way it was, for a lot of us actually.
Yeah.
A lot of us started working young. We worked our way through life changes, so to speak, and but then comes the time where you say, okay, goodbye everybody, it's time to retire.
It's time to enjoy the spoils.
At least enjoy a little bit. I mean, and it's sad because I had coworkers that retired and passed away within a couple of months after retiring and stuff like that. That's sad.
Yeah,
but
it's sad.
Such is life, mamita.
Yeah,
I mean, nothing you can do about that.
No, I got you. So this was fun. And thank you.
No,
maybe we'll continue the conversations. I feel like there's other deeper conversations.
We can talk about other
stuff.
things. Absolutely, Bella. Absolutely. Yeah.
There's so many years and so many experiences.
In 28 years working for the government, there's a lot more stories I can tell, but I really don't. If I go into them, some of them will make you blush probably. But
yes, I know. It's all good. It's all good. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome,
and
Mommy.
I love you.
I love you too,
My mom's in the other room too. Love her too. She's here observing and coaching.
Yeah.
So that was my first, which I hope is one of many conversations that I'll have with my dad about his experience working for the city. And I'm totally biased, as I said before, but I just loved listening and playing it back. Such an endearing conversation. I'm so proud of both my parents. I know I'm just talking to my dad with this episode. My mom was in the back at some point, just listening and smiling as a happy onlooker, but I am incredibly proud of both of my parents. And, certain reflections that I had just sitting with him, and then also sort of things that I've had the opportunity to sort of think about and reflect on since we had our conversation. The first is that people who are out there work in really hot and very cold conditions, 35 below and 135 above. But in all seriousness, there's a lot of things that people do that are really done under just tricky circumstances and in tough environments, and it's things that sometimes people take for granted. But just thinking about my dad, and interestingly enough, they both, my parents, keep impeccable paperwork. But my dad started with the city making $18,000, $223 to be precise. And just to put that into perspective, I have two other siblings, so my family was working to support 5 people on that kind of salary, right? So when we talk about in these conversations, fair compensation, and trying to elevate the workforce, is trying to think about what salaries are livable for people who work for the city, right? They're supporting many others, but how can we create sort of ways for them to support themselves and to support their children and sort of pave a pathway for them to take things to the next level. Something that I'll always tell people that I'm incredibly proud of is my parents really stressed the value of education and really pushed me and my sisters to take that seriously and to, pursue higher education. Both of them did not. My dad attended high school and then went right out to work. Those are the circumstances, right, for them back in the 1970s. My mom didn't finish high school. She was working as a teenager, but she did get her GED in her 50s, which I'm super proud of her for doing. But they were sort of doing things, working hard to make it better for us, the next generation, and they succeeded. Me and my sisters have all gotten college degrees. We're all very professional people, responsible people. We're great parents. We're great community people. We support many others and do incredible things for others around us. And so they've been successful in that. And I would say this is something that we should do to support city workers and their children. How do we look forward? How do we project forward to provide benefits, to provide, educational opportunities, to provide internships, to provide pathways to employment for not only city workers, but for kids and their families in the future who are going to be, right, city constituents that we should want to do and be as successful as they can be, because they would then be, right, great neighbors and great contributors to the city. And, my dad's is one of many stories in city government, right? Reflections on how city service is designed, how the compensation models are designed or lack thereof, and trying to think about how we offer flexibility for people, how we enable our growth. I mean, of course, again, I have seen this, but he's just, again, a person who worked incredibly hard. To this day, is a person who's always willing to roll up his sleeves and get into something, even into his early 70s. You have lots of people out there who are very hardworking and motivated and ambitious and care to do a good job. So it's like, how do we create opportunities to keep those people engaged in their careers in city government? And that's definitely something that I want to advocate for, is how do we elevate the people who are working to keep them engaged, so that way they're happy and are delivering the best results for the people that they're serving, whether it's they're helping coworkers do their thing that helps someone else, or if they're doing direct service for people who are New York City residents. And this is why I'm so passionate about the city's workforce and its people. Sometimes we hear about and we focus our efforts on the offenders, and we create sort of policies and regulations to address those offenders, but then they come at a consequence for the people who are doing the right thing. So sometimes we need to remember those that are doing the right thing, the upstanding citizens, so to speak, so that way we're not forgetting about them and not helping them by doing right by them and encouraging doing the right thing. And we want to elevate the field, again, investing in people's growth and understanding the ripple effect that this has on the results for the city of New York. Something else that sort of stuck out to me is this sort of battle for city benefits for retirees. In case you missed it, the city has proposed over the past few years creating a privatized health benefits program for New York City retirees to sort of curb costs. And it's understandable that the city is trying to get ahead of this, but I would just say my dad is an example, and many others, of people who had worked for these benefits for what they envisioned and understood them to be based on the time that they were hired and the time that they worked. So, my dad starting in the city in 1986 at a salary of $18,000, a big part of staying with the city for a long time was, trying to provide for his family, which was the stability of the employment, of course, to make sure he could pay the rent, keep food on the table, but also so that way we had, good health care, at least steady health care, to make sure that we were healthy and safe. And so for those that are now retired, thankfully, and obviously I'm a grown woman now, but like for those that are left on those healthcare plans and might have moved on to other cities, you structure your life around your healthcare plan. You might have decided, okay, I'm going to move here because they have decent health insurance, or this doctor takes this insurance and is within my network, to now possibly change that without uncertainty of how it's going to affect people. Sure, certain percentages might still be in the same network, but what are the costs? What is that going to do to people who are living on a fixed income? So it's things to think about, and certainly a change that I'm not supportive of, because again, these are people who worked for many, many, many years with this healthcare and this benefit in mind. To now change it for them sort of retroactively seems incredibly unfair and does not really think about the impacts for people on the other end. And these are people who worked for the city for many years. So I think we have to do right by them and think about how to fix things in another way. I gave birth to my son back in 2019 and was astounded to see the huge difference in what it costs to give birth to a child. I was in the hospital for 2 days when I had my first son back in 2013, when it was not one of these network hospitals. The cost was probably like a third of giving birth. I was astounded to see I get a bill for like $200,000 that my insurance paid. That's not a bill to me, but sort of like how it was all paid out for a 2-day stay for a natural birth with no complications. And so I would love to see the city try and think about how we can keep some of these massive network hospitals that have taken over the city accountable to not overcharging for things. Obviously, there's a lot of greatness that goes into providing good health care. However, $200,000 for a 2-day hospital stay for a natural birth to me seems exorbitant, and something that could certainly, if addressed, save the city a lot of money, or the insurance company's money, and the city a lot of money. So let's think about other ways to make that happen. We'll talk about this more in upcoming episodes, but some of the things that struck me as I talked to my dad are sort of like these issues that have prevailed over decades. So, my dad talking about issues that he ran into in the 90s, 2000s, 2010s, and working with the city are still things that we're talking about today, right? The civil service process, how funding, budgeting, and procurement can be somewhat inflexible and not responsive to needs. The layer of bureaucracy, right, and the complications and the consequences that leads to when people are trying to do their jobs on a day-to-day basis, and then trying to build cross-agency collaboration. I mean, it just feels interesting that all these years later, we're seeing these things that aren't working, that aren't syncing, and we're still talking about the same challenges. And then, trying to think about system improvements. We work a lot in systems, right, for accountability, for record keeping, to try and build efficiency and make processes faster, like, putting things into a computer and not doing things on slips and in a part book. But there's lots that we can do, over the decades with innovation and technology. The city, unfortunately, is just really far behind. There's a lot of platforms that we can leverage, but we can't procure them, or it's better to do them in-house because we don't want to pay someone externally, or there's a platform that's great, but we have to bid it out. It's like all those things that are understandable for certain regulations, but they might be, preventing the city from doing things in the most efficient way possible with very simple solutions that sort of already exist. And so we'll talk about that a lot more in upcoming episodes. But I am so grateful for my dad for being such an easy guest. He was so willing to be on and to talk about whatever I wanted to talk about. So I so appreciate that. I appreciate all of his coworkers and work family that I've had the opportunity to just spend time with, and their family members over the years. Those are memories that I cherish deeply, and I still have a great love for all of those folks. And I'd love to talk to you and to hear from you about your experience hearing this episode and others that are upcoming. We feedback and responses to this is what makes this great. Just hearing people saying this is a great idea, or I never knew this was happening, and or like, yes, this is something that we need to talk about, is what makes me continue to do this. And so I just appreciate that feedback and that love and that support. And I would love to know what you think. We have a couple ways to get in touch, and I have pages on Facebook and LinkedIn. You can also email me at liz@civilconversationsnyc.com. You can also follow the site, check it periodically, civilconversationsnyc.com, where I also have a place to drop me a message, or you can also fill out an anonymous Google form if you might have feedback or you might have ideas but don't want to share your name or your agency affiliation. You can totally reach out to me that way. I would love to hear from you. And I'm also looking for guests, people who work for the city, people who have left the city. All of that experience counts. And your experience and your insight is welcome here. This is not about, being someone with like a major title. This is about someone having an idea and experience and something that will add value to the city and make its operations and its services better. So if you have ideas, you just want to connect, please do feel free to reach out to me. I'd love to hear from you. And finally, sharing is caring. So please share the podcast with family. Please share it with friends. I'd love to get this message out to as many people as possible. Again, to get as much feedback and ideas to share with the city and the world. That's what this is all about. So please like and follow the podcast to get alerts for upcoming episodes. And let's keep the conversation going. Thanks for joining.